4 of The Thing Invisible. So where last we left off, he was shouting at his host's son in the chapel. "1 minute," I said. "Just stand to the side a moment and watch." He stepped to the left whilst I took the dummy in my arms and turned it to face the altar, so that it stood close to the gate. Then, standing well away on the right side, I pressed the back of the thing so that it leant forward a little upon the gate, which flew open. In the instant, the dummy was struck a tremendous blow that hurled it into the aisle, the armour rattling and clanging upon the polished marble floor. "Good God!" shouted young Jarnock, and ran back from the chancel rail, his face very white. "Come and look at this thing," I said, and led the way to where the dummy lay. Its armour... Its armoured upper limbs all splayed adrift in queer contortions. I stood over it and pointed. There, driven right through the thick steel breastplate, was the waeful dagger. "Good God!" said young Jarnock again. "Good God! It's the dagger. The thing's been stabbed, same as Ballot." "Yes," I replied, and saw him glance swiftly towards the entrance of the chapel. "But I will do him the justice to say that he never budged an inch." "Come and see how it was done," I said, and led the way back to the chancel rail. From the wall to the left of the altar I took down the long, curiously ornamented iron instrument, not unlike a short spear. The sharp end of this I inserted in a hole in the left-hand gatepost of the chancel gateway. I lifted hard, and a section of the post from the floor upward bent inward toward the altar, as though hinged from the bottom. Down it went, leaving the remaining part of the post standing. As I bent the movable portion lower, there came a quick click, and a section of the floor slid to one side, showing a long, shallow cavity, sufficient to enclose the post. I put my weight to the lever and hove the post down into the niche. Immediately there was a sharp clang, as some catch sneaked in and held it against the powerful operating spring. Wow. There's a lot going on. I went over now to the dummy, and after a few minutes' work managed to wrench the dagger loose out of the armour. I brought the old weapon and placed its hilt in the hole near the top of the post, where it fitted loosely and pointed upward. After that I went again to the lever and gave another strong heave. The most powerful and the post descended about a foot to the bottom of the cavity, catching there with another clang. I threw the lever, and the narrow strip of floor slid back, covering post and dagger, and looking no different from the surrounding surface. Then I shut the chancel gate, and we both stood well to one side. I took the spear-like lever and gave the gate a little push, so that it opened. Instantly there was a loud thud, and something sang through the air, striking the bottom wall of the chapel. It was the dagger. I showed Jarnock then that the other half of the post had sprung back into place, making the whole post as thick as one... as thick as... as thick as... the one upon the right-hand side of the gate. "There," I said, turning to the young man and tapping the divided post. "There's the invisible thing that used the dagger, but who the deuce is the person who sets the trap? I looked at him keenly as I spoke. "My father is the only one who has the key," he said, "so it's practically impossible for anyone to get in and meddle." I looked at him again, but it was obvious that he had not yet reached out to any conclusion. "See here, Mr. Jarnock," I said, perhaps rather curter than I should have done, considering what I had to say. "Are you quite sure that Sir Alfred is quite balanced, mentally?" "Now you worry about being cut." He looked at me, half frightenedly and flushing a little. I realized then how badly I put it. I don't know, he replied, after a slight pause, and was then silent except for one or two incoherent half-remarks. Tell the truth, I said. Haven't you suspected something, now and again? You needn't be afraid to tell me. Well, he answered slowly, I'll admit I've thought Father a little strange perhaps at times, but I've always tried to think I was mistaken. I've always hoped no one else would see it. You see, I'm very fond of the old governor. I nodded. Quite right, too, I said. There's not the least need to make any kind of scandal about this. We must do something, though, but in a quiet way. No fuss, you know. I should go and have a chat with your father and tell him we've found out about things. This thing. I touched the divided post. Young Charnock seemed very grateful for my advice, and after shaking my hand pretty hard, took my key and let himself out of the chapel. He came back in about an hour, looking rather upset. He told me that my conclusions were perfectly correct. It was Sir Alfred Jarnock who had set the trap, both on the night that the butler was nearly killed and on the past night. Indeed, it seemed that the old gentleman had set it every night for many years. He had learnt of its existence from an old manuscript book in the castle library. It had been planned and used in an earlier age as a protection for the gold vessels of the ritual, which were, it seemed, kept in a hidden recess at the back of the altar. This access Sir Alfred Jarnock had utilized secretly to store his wife's jewellery. She had died some 12 years back, and the young man told me that his father had never seemed quite himself since. I mentioned to young Jarnock how puzzled I was that the trap had been set before the service. On the night that the butler was struck, for, if I understood him aright, his father had been in the habit of setting the trap very late every night and unsetting it each morning before anyone entered the chapel. He replied that his father, in a fit of temporary forgetfulness, natural enough in his neurotic condition, must have set it too early, and hence what had so nearly proved a tragedy. That is about all there is to tell. The old man is not, so far as I could learn, really insane in the popularly accepted sense of the word. He is extremely neurotic and has developed into a hypochondriac, the whole condition probably brought about by the shock and sorrow resultant of the death of his wife, leading to years of sad broodings and to overmuch of his own company and thoughts. Indeed, young Jarnock told me that his father would sometimes pray for hours together, alone in the chapel. Carnacki made an end of speaking and leant forward for a spill. For a spill? But you've never told us just how you discovered the secret of the divided post and all that, I said, speaking for the four of us, the four guys listening to him go on. Oh, that, replied Carnacki, puffing vigorously at his pipe. I found, on comparing the photos, that the one taken in daytime showed a thicker left-hand gatepost than the one taken at night by the flashlight. That put me on the track. I saw at once that there might be some mechanical dodge at the back of the whole queer business, and nothing at all of an abnormal nature. I examined the post, and the rest was simple enough, you know. By the way, he continued, rising and going to the mantelpiece, you may be interested to have a look at the so-called Wayful dagger. Young Jarnock was kind enough to present it to me as a little memento of my adventure. People just... he takes liberties and he takes liberties. Why would you do them? He handed it round to us, and whilst we examined it, stood silent before the fire, puffing meditatively at his pipe. Jarnock and I made the trap so that it won't work, he remarked after a few moments. I've got the dagger, as you see, and old Ballard's getting about again, so that the whole business can be hushed up decently. All the same, I fancy the chapel will never lose its reputation as a dangerous place. Should be pretty safe now to keep valuables in. There's two things you haven't explained yet, I said. What do you think caused the two clangy sounds when you were in the chapel in the dark? And do you believe the soft, tready sounds were real or only a fancy, with your being so worked up and tense? Don't know for certain about the clangs, replied Karnaki. I've puzzled quite a bit about them. I can only think that the spring which worked and the post must have given a trifle, slipped, you know, in the catch. If it did, under such a tension, it would make a bit of a ringing noise, and a little sound goes a long way in the middle of the night when you're thinking of ghostesses. Ghostesses? You can understand that, eh? Yes, I agreed. And the other sounds? Well, the same thing. I mean, the extraordinary quietness may help to explain these a bit. They may have been some usual enough sounds that would never have been noticed under ordinary conditions, or they may have been only fancy. It is just impossible to say. They were disgustingly real to me. As for the slithery noise, I am pretty sure that one of the tripod legs of my camera must have slipped a few inches. If it did so, it may easily have jolted the lens cap off the baseboard, which would account for that queer little tap which I heard directly after. Jesus. How do you account for the dagger being in its place above the altar when you first examined it that night? I asked. How could it be there when, at that very moment, it was set in the trap? That was my mistake, replied Karnaki. The dagger could not possibly have been in its sheath at the time, though I thought it was. You see, the curious cross-hilted sheath gave the appearance of the complete weapon, as you can understand. The hilt of the dagger protrudes very little above the continued portion of the sheath. A most inconvenient arrangement for drawing. Quickly! He nodded sagely at the lot of us and yawned, then glanced at the clock. Hinting and shit. Out you go, hinting. Out you go, he said in friendly fashion, using the recognized formula, I want to sleep. We rose, shook him by the hand, and went out presently into the night, and the quiet of the embankment, and so to our homes. The end. So, a man-made affair after all. And yes. If you feel like it, let me know what you think. I will be reading more of these stories. Actually, which one's my favourite? I might read that one next. My favourite, I think it's The Whistling Room. Hey, I think it is The Whistling Room. Hang on. 72. The Whistling Room. Yeah, I think it is.